Shrug family, this week on Barbell Shrugged, another banger from one of our awesome friends that works with us here inside Rapid Health Optimization. Dr. Nathan Jenkins, he has a PhD in cardiovascular health, how it relates to metabolic function, dysfunction, I should say, and he does a massive amount of work inside Rapid with us on all things kind of the visible side of things, training, stress, sleep, lifestyle, as well as the hidden side of the analysis on labs, lifestyle, and supplementation, nutrition. So he really is an integral part to our team. And today on Barbell Shrugged, we'll be talking about cardiovascular health, a little bit of deep dive into the lab side of things, as well as his real specialty. He was a professor at University of Georgia. Actually really funny because every time you see that, you're expecting somebody to say, "Go Dogs." I know I did, which is, I actually think I make that terrible joke twice now that I've said it now and in the show. But if you enjoy all of this, make sure you head over to aratelab.com. That is the signature program here inside Rapid Health Optimization, where you can take a deep dive into all things lab, lifestyle, performance, the testing and analysis that we will be doing on you. And if you are very interested and you would like to schedule a call, you can do it all over at aratelab.com. That's ARETELAB.com. Friends, let's get into the show. Welcome to Barbell Shrugged. I'm Anders Warner, Doug Larson, Coach Travis Mash, Nathan Jenkins, Dr. Nathan Jenkins. That's what we're going to call you today. Typically,
that sounds good, man. Thanks for having me.
We got the PhD on here today. Today on Barbell Shrugged, we're going to be talking about cardiovascular health and specifically kind of starting this thing off, getting into metabolic health, type 2 diabetes. And one thing that's super interesting about cardiovascular health to me is anytime, or I would say at like the highest level, what do people always say? I need to work on my cardio and have no idea why they need to work on it. Outside of they think they're going to like go run better. But that's probably like just scratching the surface on exactly what they need to be understanding cardiovascular health for and the depth that we're going to be getting into today. And I'd love to start just kind of understanding as far as like metabolic health, type 2 diabetes, things that we're seeing, population wide. How does cardiovascular health kind of start to scratch the surface on the like health optimization side or living a better life on the metabolic health side?
Yeah, well, one of the things I'm really fascinated about is the connection between metabolic health and cardiovascular health. I spent a long time in my university training, my graduate training, and also and back in my academic career, I was a professor for a long time at the University of Georgia, nearly a decade. And one of the main
Nobody even
connections,
said "Go Dogs" in that when he said that's like it's like what
yeah,
you're
well,
supposed to say, right?
yeah, go Dogs. It's a sort of a disappointing year for us, but well, and it ended in a disappointing way. It was a good year, but um, yeah. So as far as that connection between metabolic and cardiovascular health, trying to improve your cardio and being more than just like, trying to run better and stuff, man, it's literally kind of it can come to a life and death thing. It is something that absolutely plays into our overall longevity. So for example, and I think I heard a recent podcast where Dan was talking about this too, and it bears repeating. Something like around fasting blood glucose concentration of once you start to get above like 85 milligrams per deciliter, there's sort of a linear relationship between cardiovascular mortality. So like you might be at like a 95, which is in the normal range. Anything under 100 is still considered clinically normal. But there's a sort of a quantifiable linear relationship between cardiovascular outcomes and fasting glucose concentrations. Just use that as one of many metrics that we could talk about. For example, even within that normal range, we begin to see a marked elevation in cardiovascular risk. So it's really important, I think, to be thinking about optimizing our metabolic health. It's not just glucose, but like insulin and all of the sequelae that come from when these things are out of whack. It gets into oxidative stress and inflammation and immune system inappropriately activated and all of these things. Gut health, you fill in the blank, and there's a metabolic connection to it. And again, that for a long time, that interest for me, because it turns out the thing that actually kills the most people is a cardiovascular either event or disease. And so that's where going way, way, way back to when I started my training. I was like, well, I'm really interested in the cardiovascular system. I'm interested in blood vessels, but what's a really important problem to focus on as far as like somebody, that's something advice I give people going into grad school or whatever. Find something that's really actually important, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that seemed like a pretty important problem
Yeah.
to spend a lot of time and thought on, is that connection between metabolic health and cardiovascular health. So
Yeah. One of the everybody that's been listening to the show for a little while knows that I just went on like a year-long journey to running a really fast mile, or trying to at least.
yeah,
And
crushed it.
in that process, um, the idea of running and cardiovascular fitness and
Hmm.
VO2 max, you
Hmm.
can't really help it. You go through a whole year, you're thinking a lot about your cardiovascular system. And um, I started creating the framework in my brain of like doing the when there's kind of like the high intensity sprinting side. There's like a
Hmm.
VO2 max training side, and then a lot more on the just call it like zone two side of things. You can
Yeah,
kind of break
aerobic
those,
base. Yep.
yeah, break those into three main groups, and really thinking about the speed and efficiency of how well my body is pumping blood and oxygen to the muscles to be able to use them. And um, when I think now about kind of that zone two slow thing, I really think about it more of just like speeding up the kind of the intensity that my body is processing blood, like just getting good at practicing moving
Hmm.
blood faster.
Hmm. Hmm.
And when
Hmm.
you're looking at like the VO2 max training, that's like trying to get your body to train like a Ferrari. Like if you're gonna,
Hmm.
you got to be able to see how long you can push your system to be as efficient as possible. And you start to get really good at it by
Hmm.
training that. And then
Hmm.
the sprinting side of things, kind of being like, how do we just overload the system as quickly as possible so that we're really like in like a weightlifting terms, like building like a 1 or a 2 rep max so that
Exactly.
everything else from a 5 to an 8 to a 10, 12, something along those lines, like is just an easier and done at higher percentages of that bigger number.
Hmm.
Um, when you think about kind of like developing that system, how important is it to be in like, or are they equally balanced in training from high intensity sprints? Do we need
Hmm.
people really nerding out on like the podcast that they heard where it's like you have to do 3 bouts or 4 bouts of VO2 max for 45 minutes and it has to be in this heart rate? Like, how do you kind of
Yeah.
coach people in each of those and understanding what's really important for being healthy?
Yeah. But yeah, I think my first thought is it really depends on the goal. And like Andrews, your goal of getting as fast as you can at the mile is sort of a different goal than being overall healthy. But I think it's different, but there's a lot of overlap and it's probably more similar than it is different. My view on like, let's talk about metabolic health in the context of exercise. Um, and you alluded to this in your description. I think that was really cool. Like you got the one engine, the one. So we got these different metabolic engines, right? The different metabolic pathways. You got the phosphocreatine pathway. You got the glycolytic pathway. You got the oxidative pathway, and they're all sort of different engines that our body uses to produce fuel. And um, there's my personal belief for optimal health, and this, one of the key words in the name of the company is rapid health optimization, is that an optimal exercise protocol will develop the capacity of all of those systems um, to some degree. Now, that's sort of for overall health, absolutely. And so like that sort of baseline, sort of like idle, that's not idle's not the word, but let's use it for analogy. But going back to the engines thing, sort of like your ability to idle and maybe ramp up to some significant degree. That's your oxidative system. That's like that zone two. That's hugely
Yeah.
important. That is your foundation for sure. Um, that's how we train, such that like a practical application that I like to think about is why do I do zone two? Why do I include that in my program from a longevity and health standpoint? Well, I don't want to be at my VO2 max. And when I'm a little over 40 now, and I think I like to think in terms like 20, 30 years down the road. I don't want to be what should be a zone two stimulus, like getting up out of this desk chair that I'm sitting in and walking across my house to go let my dog out after this call. I don't want that to be a zone four, zone five activity, right?
Yeah.
So now a big part of my training now is to do a lot of what's in my zone two capacity now to sort of keep that sort of maintain the foundation of my metabolic fitness. And then you get into the higher zones, and you get into the intervals with the VO2 max training and the hot top end sprint intervals, that the Ferrari like drag race kind of stuff. To a certain degree for health, for sure, and we absolutely program that for our clients, right? It's every week they're getting some dosage of that, but um, we sort of go up and down in terms of our emphasis with the different components of our metabolic fitness, depending on the individual's goals. Like, so somebody's got a real competitive goal, like, hey, I want to run a mile in under 6 minutes. And then, well, geez, we're going to do a lot of top end stuff each week, and a lot of time at that way above threshold. And a lot of it too is just adapting. Like, that's really, you want all of those energy systems to be at high capacity. Yes, it's primarily an aerobic component, but you're doing a whole lot of glycolytic work at that, and those, in an effort like that, it's going to hurt the entire time. And you got to get used to it. A lot of this training is between the years, just being uncomfortable that entire time too. So, yeah, it's all of it. So I love all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm curious if you have some degree of vascular damage from many years of inactivity and
Mhm.
poor nutrition habits, et cetera, as you begin to implement more and more healthy lifestyle choices and eat better food and getting better
Mhm.
shape and more cardio
Mhm.
and all the things, are you really reversing any of that, or are you just like slowing down the progression of it from there on out? To what
That's a
degree can
great
you like
question.
repair your
Yeah,
vascular system?
that's a great question, Doug. And there's a lot of sort of debate in the literature on. I'll start specifically with atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease.
Mhm.
Um, It's something I followed quite a bit. The evidence, as I understand it, is that with when we all of us have some degree of atherosclerotic, that's the presence of plaques in your arteries. It is very, very difficult to promote regression of the plaque. Through exercise alone, there's been a lot of studies on, like, in animal models and looking at human subjects through exercise intervention alone. It does not seem, I'm going to go ahead and say evidence points to it not being altogether that likely that you're going to see a lot of plaque regression. It's probably not possible.
Mhm.
But just that's without like any other intervention. So there's like a lot, like, and
That's
there's a whole
purely from
from
exercising.
exercise. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
But it can stabilize the plaque progression. This is the human clinical data on this is from uh, trials where they look directly at the plaque over a period of time, like say anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months of an intervention. And we could see evidence of stabilization of the plaque. Like, it may not get worse, but including with like high intensity interval training, some really cool studies is particularly coming out of Europe using a technique called IVUS, intravascular ultrasound, where they put a ultrasound probe in the vessel and kind of get this 3D rendering of the vessel. Some really cool stuff from that.
Hmm.
But yeah, not a whole lot of evidence of actually regressing the plaque. Uh, but through other maneuvers like nutritional intervention, and that typically includes weight loss, maybe it's, some evidence of regression. And then certainly with certain pharmaceutical interventions, statins and so forth. Again, evidence is mixed. Not every study shows this. And I honestly have to look at to the very latest. Um, to see what the current consensus is. But you see certainly in the literature some reports here and there of plaque regression. Probably not complete reversal, not completely like, oh my God, the artery's clean, but significantly favorable clinical outcomes in terms of the plaque regression, plaque morphology. Another big thing is plaque stabilization. The plaque can stabilize, and even if it does, the amount of plaque in the vessel doesn't change so much, the
Hmm.
plaque can take on a morphology where it'll get like a fibrous cap on the top of it, and
Hmm.
become less prone to rupture. And it's really the rupture of the plaque and the dislodging of like of a blood clot, of a thrombus, that
Hmm.
typically is the cause of most myocardial infarctions, most cardiac events.
Hmm.
And the vessel can become less prone to that. With favorable with lifestyle and some pharmaceutical intervention. So that's, before we go on. I want to answer the question with the second part. Um, as far as like exercise or nutrition or any lifestyle modification, I was just talking about a very specific but also really important case of like what happens with the plaque. All that being said, it's also true that studies have shown significant improvements in vascular health and other like peripheral vascular health. A lot of a site that's common to look at for vascular health is sort of a somewhat of a proxy for the whole body is the brachial artery. The the dilatory capacity of the brachial artery, or also starting to look more and more at vessels of the legs. So the popliteal artery is a common site to look at. And that's important because that's the vessel that supplies blood flow to the working muscles during most forms of exercise, like walking, running, cycling, whatever have you.
Mm-hmm.
Those, and also the microvasculature, small vessels. We have lots of measures that I won't get into for that. By and large, exercise training, nutrition, improving your diet, all that good stuff, reducing oxidative stress, reducing inflammation. A lot of those indices of both large vessel and small vessel health in the periphery of the body are very amenable to lifestyle changes. So, and that in the last few minutes has been a condensed version of a course I taught at the university on cardiovascular physiology and pathophysiology, right? So like, and I like to compartmentalize it in terms of like the vessels that supply the heart, and where you get the atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. It's like kind of truly a life and death situation. And also systemic vascular health. It's not always the same answer. It depends on where you look throughout the arterial tree, as we like to put it. So it's yeah, that's a lot. Sorry, so complex answer, but basically we should be doing the things that we know that are good for us, because that's going to be good for your cardiovascular system.
Yeah, 100%. So there's the plaque buildup piece, and then you can have a piece of plaque kind of break off, and then it ends up like giving you some type of peripheral vascular issue as it floats down to the smaller arteries of the limbs and legs. And then you have the coronary artery issues, and then you have brain issues where you could have some type of a stroke, right? Those are kind of like the big three areas.
So if something breaks off, then you're in trouble. If there's a thrombus, then, and if it's large enough, at some point, so like as the arterial tree goes through its various branches, right? The diameter of the arteries gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so you got a blood clot that's floating through, and it may go through the large pipe, the conduit artery, just fine. And you get into what we call the first order arterioles, maybe just fine. Second order starting to squeeze through, and then the third order arteriole, then you're stuck, right? Or just depending, I'm making that up as I go. But at some point you're going to get to a pipe that's too small to accommodate that the chunk, the thrombus that's floating through, and then anything downstream of that, anything distal to that that is subservient to that vessel's blood supply, we're going to have an infarct, is what we call it, the death of the tissue, or at least a lack of blood flow supply and deoxygenation of the tissue. And in the worst case of this is death of that tissue. And if that's in the coronary circulation, that you're bad news. If it's in the cerebral circulation, that's a stroke. And if it's in the lower, so this is a big problem in peripheral arterial disease and atherosclerotic disease of the lower body. You can get an infarct of the cat. This also very much correlates with metabolic disease. Coming back to the original topic of conversation, right? Type 2 diabetes and peripheral arterial disease really, really track together. So you see a lot of the lower limb amputations in the cases of diabetic peripheral arterial disease. So you've got really poor circulation and a lot of oxidative damage to begin with, and then you get the acute event is that infarct of the lower limb, and there's really no hope for the tissue to heal. So the best thing that the medical care team can do for that patient is to cut it off.
I remember my grandfather dealing with a lot of that. Like he would get a little blister on his foot. Like, he was a farmer. So he had this we had a 600-acre farmer, 600-acre farm in the deep Appalachians. He would be driving his tractor all day, and then come home and he'd just get a blister that would just turn into it would just be the grossest wound.
Ulcer.
And like it'd be months of him trying to deal with it. And sometimes it ended up in hospital, and it's just terrible.
Sure, man. Yeah, it's terrible. Sure. It's awful. And they can be painful. They can also be, if there's a neuropathy there, they may not even feel it. And then a lot of times I talk to several, I know in my area, several vascular surgeons, and they'll be like, this patient didn't even know that they had this wound that was kind of sort of festering and not healing. And then one day they'll go in, and it's like, wow, too little too late. And we got to cut this thing off, man. So it's really awful stuff. It's really awful.
It's always seemed wild to me that type 2 diabetes seems like this thing where if someone comes to me, or just like a regular person says, oh yeah, my uncle's diabetic, everyone's like, yeah, bummer, it's almost like it's not that big of a deal. It's like common enough to be what's the right way to put this? Like, no one thinks it's a good thing, but nobody's like
Right.
terrified of it. Like, if you get cancer, you're fucking terrified of it. But if
Yeah.
you get
People listening in their car
diabetes,
can't see my face when you say it. That's terrified.
Hmm.
but yeah,
Terrified of
like
it.
if you got some other random disease and someone said, "Oh, I've never heard of that. What happens?" And they go, "Oh, might have to amputate my feet, or I might go blind." People go, "Holy shit!" Like that's a big
Right.
Yeah.
deal. But like when someone
Yeah.
says
Yeah.
they're diabetic, they go, "Oh, that's a bummer. It's a big
It's
deal."
so
It's
Like,
a bummer.
normalized that if you just said the symptoms only,
Yeah.
people would be like,
Yeah.
"What do you do?" You'd be like, "Well, you got to go for a run.
You
Yeah.
literally, but you're good. You know, people can
You
actually
gotta eat
control it.
more protein.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to eat
You
more
can come
protein."
back from that. You just
Yeah.
people just won't.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's actually talk about that. Like, you can't really
Hmm.
technically on paper like cure it, but it's like it's very manageable. At least type
Oh
2 is like
yeah.
very manageable with many interventions. Can we just like run through a list of like the top things that you actually have control over that you could do to move the needle and kind of control that disease state?
Yeah. Well, I actually believe that for a large swath of cases, it is reversible as long as the
I do
pancreas is
too.
still
Yeah.
able to produce
Right.
insulin.
Hmm.
Then it should be largely reversible.
Yes.
And there is now, like, in the last few years, the American Diabetes Association has sort of come out with a adjusted position stand, where it's like type 2 diabetes is actually they define in the setting of which it can be, it can go into regression, or I'm not sure, I have to double check the language. They shy away, I think, from using the term cure, but
Right.
and again, I mean, we can talk about definitions. If we define a positive diagnosis of type 2 diabetes as an HbA1c of 6.5, well, it's possible to get your HbA1c below that, right? And then again,
So
it's almost
darn near.
yeah, well, yeah, you
Yeah.
can absolutely, like, people, if you're at 7.2 and with lifestyle intervention, which again, going back to Doug's questions, things within your control, um, without medication, and the insulin is there's the pancreas is still the beta cells are still producing insulin. Yeah, so yeah, the things in your control. The lifestyle stuff, man, the physical activity, and it's the nutrition. Usually it's not usually, it's almost always a big problem is, again, within someone's control, is excessive caloric intake, typically typified by excessive simple carbohydrate consumption. That's causing dysregulation of glucose control. And so that's reduce. So reduce. First thing is, if you're drinking any of your calories, in particular, drinking your carbohydrates in the form of simple sugars, well, just replace that with Diet Coke or water. That's a step number one, and that will go a long way to getting your caloric excess under control, getting back towards calorie balance, and also getting that the excessive glycemic load into your body, and more in keeping and matching with what your metabolic output actually is, which is really what we're after. So that's one. And then two, move more. The skeletal muscle contraction is the best way to get glucose out of the circulation, which again, type 2 diabetes or excessive glucose in any context, diabetes or pre-diabetes or otherwise, is a problem of more fuel than we need. So increase the need, rev up the engine, man. And so that, and it doesn't have to be going back to, I think it was Anders asking about, like, which of the metabolic, my interpretation of it was, which of the metabolic systems do we need to be firing on? Man, maybe zone 2 will still be a significant glycolytic or glucose utilizing activity for sure. I mean, there are a lot of it'll be used aerobically, but yeah, if you've got it available, then the muscle will use it, and it'll
That's
take
the
it
best way to
preferentially out of the
direct
bloodstream.
traffic.
So
You got to tell the
yeah,
food where to
exactly.
go. You got to tell sugar
Exactly.
where it's supposed to be
Exactly.
used, not just sit there.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the sink is the problem is the sinks are full, right? The muscle sink is full. If you're sedentary, and the liver sink is full. So it's just there's just like traffic jam in the circulation. We need to get that out. The best thing to do is just to move, right? So and interesting, it's all, I know this will probably be common knowledge to a lot of the listeners of this podcast, but in case not, it turns out it's the exact same transport mechanism between insulin stimulated glucose uptake by the muscle and contraction stimulated glucose uptake. They both involve the same receptor. It's called GLUT4. You can use insulin to get the GLUT4 receptor on the cell surface, or you can contract the muscle and get GLUT4 receptor on the cell surface. There's slightly different initial pathways, but in the side of the cell, they converge and it becomes sort of more or less the same mechanism. And so even in the context of insulin deficiency, you can still get that glucose out of your circulation is the bottom line. So going back to like if somebody gets a diagnosis of diabetes, it's like, oh, well, maybe it's no big deal because they can just get on for the first line of defense is like metformin, and there's all these second and third line defenses. And ultimately, it's insulin, but still, even that is not looked at at the societal level. It's all that big. Oh, you got insulin, you're fine. You got exogenous insulin. Well, what if you didn't actually need to use it, or you could reduce your dose just by contracting your muscles a little bit, right? And so, yeah, there's a lot within your control when it comes to glucose control, and we're talking in the patient population now, regardless of where they are on the disease progression. There's even at advanced stages, there's a lot within your control to mitigate disease, even if it's not reversible at that point. So,
yeah. Earlier, you made a comment about something that Dan has said on the show many times about once your glucose is above 85, for every point above 85, I believe the exact number there is you're 6% more likely to become type 2 diabetic. And so if you're at a 95, you're 60% more likely to be type 2 diabetic, even though you're not even technically on you're not even on the pre-diabetic list, which is 100, which is above 100 rather. It's very interesting how we kind of have these lines in the sand where it's like you're fine over here and then you're like you're not fine over here, as opposed to like this spectrum of like you're on your way and you probably should do something while you're on your way. And I kind of attack the problem much earlier. Aside from blood glucose, like are there any other markers where you could like very clearly see that you're on your way to having a bad time with your metabolic health? Of course, there's many, but like what are the top markers, and like what are like the numbers that you really should pay attention to before you've crossed over like the medical line?
Oh yeah. Well, dude, it's a great point. This gets into the difference between like how a physiologist kind of looks at some things and how clinicians, and I don't want to shit on clinicians. Clinicians have to have diagnostic criteria, and it becomes like a binary yes, no, right? And that's where like the 100 and up comes from for glucose. And that's where for like that line between normal and pre-diabetic, right? But the fact is, physiology is not binary like that. It's linear. A lot of times, I mean, there are some things that can operate like a threshold phenomenon, but a lot of these variables are absolutely more linear, and that is the nature of the biology here. And it's really interesting that there's this disconnect from a clinical standpoint on that. So anyway, just kind of that's something I think about all the time, and I appreciate so much how Dan and you guys and this company thinks on a more linear scale. Like let's look at each data point or variable for what it is. Is it something that we need to be paying attention to, even if it's in quote unquote the healthy range or not? But yeah, some other metrics, man. The other one that comes to mind, and it's very much related, is the A1C. Because there can be a spurious like fasting glucose reading due to like, say, you didn't get a good sleep that night. Maybe you did have a bigger meal than usual and you got a little bit of residual. A single measurement of fasting glucose is not sufficient to make a big deal about anything. But the A1C, man, that's average of 3 months of overall blood glucose, right? That's due to the fact that it's a permanent, modification of your red cells, and the lifespan of a red blood cell is about 4 months. And so it's the way it works out as far as turnover rates and everything. It's regarded as like a 3-month sort of average glucose, or a reflection of your average blood glucose over the previous 3 months. So that's another, man. If that's a good one. So that can circumvent the issue of, well, what if this is an outlier? If I just look at my single one-off reading. And then some other ones that I would look at are glycemic responses to, and what I mean by that is the change in blood glucose following either like a standardized meal or just like throughout the day. So that gets into, I'm not going to sit here and advocate for continuous glucose monitors for everyone, but like if somebody's got concerns about their blood glucose, whether it's a one-off or maybe more than one-off fasting blood glucose concentration, or A1C is a little higher, kind of borderline, you get into like the 5.5, 5.6, 5.7 range, pushing up on that 6% number, then maybe just like get some strips. You can, health insurance companies tend to cover them. Or even if not, they're not terribly expensive, but just like the CVS or whatever, just get some blood glucose strips and eat your normal food, eat your normal meal, and see what is my glucose response. to my normal diet, like my normal breakfast meal, my normal lunch meal. And a good number, I mean, it's the International Diabetes Federation recommends that our what we call our postprandial, our blood glucose concentrations after any meal, regardless of what it's composed of, should never really exceed about 140. And which sounds kind of low, because the clinical guidelines go way above that, but or other clinical guidelines, I should say, go above that. So if you're at any point like at that 2 hour mark after a meal, that 2 hour, I would say between 1 and 2 hours, if you're exceeding 140 milligrams per deciliter on a regular basis, in that postprandial state, then that could be some signs of some problems, specifically insulin resistance of the body's tissues, like the muscle, and liver and so forth. Postprandial is mostly muscle driven, and yeah, that's a good sign that, again, it circles back to the same shit. Like, we need to be working out, we need to be moving, we need to be exercising, right? And also, you can also, there's two ways. The other, just finish the thought. Reduce the carbohydrate content of that meal is probably in excess of what you need. Right. So,
well, what were you gonna ask, Doug? I was curious. I was gonna say, just being from the mountains, like, man, I'm gonna make sure I send this to every family member I have. It's just like, it's so rampant. Like, I've grown up, my mother's always been worried about me because my grandfather had it and it eventually took his life. And my grandmother on the other side had it and eventually took her life. But I've never it's never been close. It's just like,
dude, yeah. Remind me, Mash, are you in North Carolina, Virginia?
No, North Carolina. Yeah.
That's what I thought. You live is it what part? Asheville area, Brevard?
No, Asheville's actually a lot nicer than where I'm from, near Boone.
Boone. Oh, yeah.
I'm from Asheville, called West Jefferson.
Okay, I know Boone. I love that. You live in one of my favorite parts of the entire country. Like,
it's awesome.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And similar in my family, I don't sound like it, but I'm born and raised in the state of Georgia.
Oh yeah.
And my whole family is very similar story. I mean, heart disease and diabetes, quote unquote, runs in my family, right? And like, it's always just, I grew up here and it's like, oh, your genetics are working against you.
Yeah, hell no. You should eat genetics. Come eat with us, and you'll know, right? Like, every night, gravy and biscuit, gravy on everything. Like,
absolutely.
We had green beans from the garden, but
chicken fried everything.
Everything. Dude, you can check. I saw on Instagram. Did you know that you can chicken fry an egg? I saw somebody chicken fry an egg with the breading and everything, and in the inside, the egg, the yolk was still like running. It looks freaking good.
Thank God I was an athlete.
I almost might try it. Actually,
I'm so glad I learned to eat to perform versus, like, the mountains. You eat to enjoy, and the whole, like the whole family. I mean, we were traditional, like, every day at like 5:30. Like, not just my immediate, but like my grandfather, grandmother, cousins, aunts, uncles,
that daily ritual
single day. And like, it was so good, man. But like, and nobody leaving there feeling good though. God, like, chocolate gravy. You've ever heard of that? My grandmother made chocolate gravy. That's the most delicious stuff in the world. But
that sounds
like a southern thing.
Way up yonder in those mountains, kind of thing. Yeah.
Bro, if I took you where I'm from, you wouldn't even be able to communicate. My wife, Doug and Anders knows this. My wife won't even get out of the car where I'm from. Like, I was like, hey, let's go walk around. She's like, hell no, I'm not getting out of the car.
I want to see it. I want to come visit.
But come visit. I'll take you. Just get your accent back real quick.
I want to jump in on a comment that you made earlier about movement. You were saying that you have GLUT4 transporters that are responsive to insulin, but they're also responsive to muscle contraction. They kind of go from the inside of the cell to the cell membrane and pull glucose into the cell. That's a good thing for many reasons. So I think it's very common nowadays for people to fall into the trap of still leading a fairly sedentary life. You're on your laptop all day, like. That's what I do. Most of my work these days is just sitting at my desk on my laptop, and then I go train for an hour. And I feel like I'm a pretty healthy person, even if I was like sedentary most of the day, but I got my 1 hour workout in. That still doesn't really check the box all the way for movement. That checks the box in my mind for exercise, but it doesn't really check the box for movement. There's got to be more movement throughout the day So, A, I want your thoughts on that, and then B,
Yeah.
for people that, especially doing damage control on like Thanksgiving dinner and things like that, or you're going to a
Yeah.
birthday party, you know, you're going to eat a bunch of
Yep.
junk or whatever it is. Like, how do you use movement to kind of mitigate the
Oh
downside
yeah.
of days where you know you're going to be eating not so well?
Oh yeah. Great questions. Which one do I want to tackle first, man? Because they're both really good. Let's go. I'll start with the first one, which is essentially like you're working out. So you're checking the box on working out, but basically maybe not getting a lot of other movement in.
Really
I
easily, dude gets jacked, never hits 10,000 steps.
Correct. Yeah, I was going to go to steps.
Yeah.
I was going to go to steps. That's something I've been experimenting with personally. I mean, we can talk about the science, but I also think listeners value like personal anecdotes from folks like us. And I'm just going to give mine. I started paying closer attention because my thought process was I'm going to go back to the sort of the end of 23. I've always for the last 5, 6 years maintained pretty decent body composition. At that point, I was getting pretty damn lean. Or 10%, 12% body fat, and sort of sustaining that.
I would take
But
that. I would love
yeah, no,
that.
it's good. But like, I just like, I'm also, it wasn't, and there wasn't any marker that I said my glucose, I had to look at it was at the time, but it was fine. But I just like, man, I want to do more. Well, I was getting more and more into running, so I started to pay attention to my steps in that way. But just like also just like that daily basal activity, um, trying to do more of like walking my dog. Sometimes the poor guy, I walk him twice a day. I've got a little boy. He was about 18 months at the time. He's coming up on 3 now. But we play outside as much as we can
Nice.
and
Good.
try to accumulate steps that way, and sort of start monitoring like my metric for all that was steps. For me, the more I can get up to about 20, even including up to and above 20,000 steps in a day, almost universally, the better I feel. Um, Now that's really anecdotal, right? And that's very nebulous. I don't have a concrete metric for that. But just like if I just rate myself feeling, I'll give you like feelings of energy, even though I'm burning more energy, but just feelings of like sort of mental energy, brain power, lack of brain fog, um, all like all that stuff. Like I'm moving closer to 10 out of 10 on those scales. Almost it's a kind of a linear relationship. My basal, like what I try to maintain is about 12 to 15,000 steps in a day. It's been hard because it's fucking cold right now. Um, but in the
It's
summer
really
month,
cold.
spring and summer months when I can, and that I will say that does include like if I go for a run, I'm tracking on my watch and I'm not going to subtract out some people are like, oh, if you're going for a run, that doesn't count. Well, I count those. So anyway, man, I think, and I have to think that that is well, I will tie it back to the metabolism thing. If somebody's already checking all the boxes on their nutrition and on their training frequency, volume, intensity, getting all that dosing right, but they're still maybe they want to optimize their glucose, and it could be any other metric, but that's an easy one that we could then kind of keep with the theme. Say they're tracking at like 93, 92, 91, and still want to get back down. Like they got the Dan Gardner mantra etched in their brain. And it's stressing them out. Well, I want to get back to that 85 because I want to get that 6%, every 6% that I can get. I want to get it, right? Well, maybe steps, maybe daily activity is a lever to pull. Um, and so it's been a while since my last checkup was in August. I got another one coming up in May around my birthday. I'll be curious to see. I hope I'm in that like in the 80s at least, right? And not in the 90s. And I do think that that's again the daily activity, the daily steps thing. If you're already checking all the other boxes, then that's a really good one. To if you and that's an area for improvement or for growth. The other caveat though I want to give at the same time, I don't mean to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but this is just from work with a bunch of my nutrition clients over the years. Telling somebody to move more, to walk more when they're already fucking maxed out in terms of like all the life commitments and stressors. Like they got 3 kids, they got a job, they're driving their kids everywhere. So like for activities and stuff, like oh, I guess I got to so I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. and just make myself miserable and stare at a white cinder block wall on my treadmill in my basement. Let's not work. Like we got to like be realistic here and weigh the benefits and drawbacks with all these different maneuvers. So I
Dude, I
wouldn't like
think that's a
sacrifice sleep for
massively
it.
important point.
Yeah.
Like, I actually think if possible, figuring out how to play things.
Hmm.
Go just kick it with your kids. Like that's
Yeah.
like the easiest
That's the easiest
way
one.
to
Yeah.
not have like that's actually the part of the zone two conversation that drives me
100%.
nuts is how many people
Yeah.
really have 45 extra minutes 3 to 4 days a week to just sit on a rowing machine and
And,
go slow.
and go at like 120 beats per minute.
It
No, but
doesn't
like, but
exist.
playing with my son is my zone too. Like it
It's the
can
best.
absolutely.
Go
If I
kick
look
a
at my
soccer
watch,
ball.
yeah. And the parents out there, one of the biggest things we've joked around, I think on some of our weekly group calls at times, like about like there's a whole meme about the alpha dad and all that kind of stuff. And well, one of the
This
good
is the
things about
ultimate
yeah,
alpha dad.
yeah, I think,
Man.
we're cut from the same cloth because I'm totally that way too.
Oh
But
yeah. Oh, we
what
need
I
a
will say,
team party. I want to see who's the true alpha.
No shirts ever. Especially when other dads are around, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Gotta flex. Sure.
but truly though, like one of the things that I think about using my fitness for is to not sit there. I don't want to be one of these dads that sits there and watching. I want to fucking participate. Like we had our first ever snow in Georgia, like in 5 years, a couple weeks ago. And I will say this: all the parents in the neighborhood were actually active. They're playing with it. I love to see it. But I'm like, and I'm like right there with all the kids, like going down the slats, going down the hill, and then next to your neighbor's house and all that kind of stuff. If my son's in the pool in the summer, I'm in there with him, and I don't want to be sitting there getting my suntan. Right?
Me too.
Like,
I'm in there with him. Right. Yeah.
exactly. Like parenting, like kids are freaking active. They're running everywhere. That's a huge opportunity to get some activity in. So if you participate versus spectate, that's an easy choice, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe you don't need to stress yourself out about getting on the rower and all that.
I think that always comes down to the environment that you are building around yourself to succeed.
Yeah.
I just became a farmer like a month ago, and it's
congrats.
Yo,
Okay. That sounds pretty alpha.
Yeah, it's gangster, man. I was climbing trees with a hatchet last weekend, chopping down stuff so I could build hunting stands. Are you kidding me? The dude just overnight turned into something.
Testosterone.
Faking it until I make it. Totally faking it. But when you are up moving and wheelbarrowing and like
in
the suburbs, you're like, I don't want to do that yard work. When you like design your life that has to be done, you're gonna find 20,000
built
steps,
in,
and you don't even think about it. It's just you're constantly doing things. You just have like it's like a job to do on a daily basis. It's just you chose this life, and now every Saturday, Sunday, Friday afternoon, whatever it is, it's like you're hitting 15, 20,000 steps, and it's
100%.
2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you don't. It's just built into your life.
Yeah, man. My favorite days are in the summer when. So if the schedule allows, spring and summer, the schedule allows, like I can wake up in the morning, get a CrossFit workout in, maybe go for a run, and then do yard work all afternoon. And those are my 25,000 step days. And that's the best.
And if you want to give up like 60% of your money, you can move to San Diego and you can walk forever.
You can do all the shit year round. Yeah. I was just talking with someone about San Diego this morning. I love that city.
It's the greatest. That's actually
I can't afford it.
It's on fire right now there, right? Like
that's LA.
I thought they both were. Okay. I knew LA was, I thought they
LA's lights out, man. It's not good.
Yeah.
That was really living in San Diego was actually like a turning point in life where it was like, I have to go do all these things. Like the sun is so perfect there that it's different.
Amazing.
And then you just become addicted to it and you can't. And then it disappears for like January and February in North Carolina. And I'm like, where did my happiness go?
Yeah. It's really bad.
It's really a piece of my life.
Yeah. It's tough. Even here in Georgia, it's better. It's way better in Georgia than other places. I lived in Maryland and Missouri for a while. It's way better here.
Yeah.
But still it's rough. Like I'm ready for the spring to come back, man. That vitamin D, need that sun.
I know it's not bad here because it's like 40 to 60 days of cold before the shirts come off again.
We can wait. That's not even
handle it. I can handle
that's not even a quarter. Yeah.
Andrews, I pegged you for being the guy who goes shirtless, even at 32 degrees. No.
Here's where 40 degrees is like the cutoff. If you're going from 20 to 40,
That's
Carp's
balmy.
off.
That feels good.
Carp is off. If you're going 60 to 40, you're frozen.
Yeah.
Completely frozen. I actually had a
it's all.
client that lived in Alaska, and she told me that coming out of the winter, they will, as soon as it hits like 34 degrees, they're all out sun tanning. They lay out.
They're all
They're like
naked.
at the beach. They just give me some of that sun because it's been dark and cold, and they
Yeah.
haven't had any happiness in a long time. And then all of a sudden, it's there.
I know
Bro,
it's all relative.
on Sunday we got trapped. We just decided to do a day trip to Boone and got stuck in a snowstorm. We had to spend the night. Couldn't get back.
Oh my
No way.
gosh.
It
Oh,
was
no.
terrible. And when we left, finally on Monday when we left, it was 9 degrees. And when we got home, it was 27. And that's a big
Oh, good.
difference. Like
That's a
27
big
felt
difference.
great. Yeah. I was like,
Yes.
man, let's go lay out in the sun. It's awesome. Yeah.
It's 25 here today, or was this morning, and all us Georgia people are crying, including myself. It's miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doug, you asked the second question about like a big meal and what to do with how the movement kind of plays into that, and I actually love that question as well. Do you want to
Yeah.
wrap on that for just a second?
Yeah, we're ticking down to the end of the show here. We got a few minutes.
Okay.
So give me your high level
Yeah.
2-minute answer to that.
Sure. The best thing you can do, especially if you've had a significant glycemic load in your meal, a lot of carbohydrates, either healthy or otherwise, and most of the time, I think in this context, we're talking about otherwise, cake, whatever. The best thing you can do is move. So that's a little bit of research we did, and as part of a much larger body of work. So to give credit where it's due, it's a pretty big field on this, but one of the best ways to manage what we call postprandial glucose excursions, or big spikes in blood sugar following a carbohydrate-rich meal, is if you time it ideally between about 15 to 45 minutes after the meal, go for a walk. Or any kind of movement, but most of the studies just use walking because it's practical. Like that after dinner walk that you do with your family in the evenings when it is nice and not 25 degrees outside, like we're talking about. There's some sort of innate biological drive to like to prevent diabetes or something from it. I don't know, but it turns out. So if the graphs on this stuff is so cool, and I wish this was if this is a video podcast, I didn't come prepared to show it, but the way I'm going to talk with my hands for you guys, because you can see me, like the way the glucose curve after a meal looks, it's like it goes up and up and up and up. And if you time the walk after to begin about 15 to 20 minutes after the meal, the glucose trend literally reverses and starts going back down. And that's sort of sustained as long as you walk for. In some of the studies we did, we played around with anywhere from 15 to about 50 minutes. And that 50-minute walk in particular was an interesting one where we broke it up into 10-minute bouts, like go for a walk for 10 minutes and then hang out. And we had them just stand there and rest for 3 minutes just to kind of break it up, because 50 minutes of walking for someone with type 2 diabetes uninterrupted was kind of daunting. But man, that really did a nice job of normalizing the glucose response and kept it from reaching those really dangerous high levels of postprandial glucose. And that's really important too, because that postprandial glucose spike, the magnitude of the spike, how high the glucose gets after a meal is very, very, what's the word? It's a significant insult, significant toxic dose to the cardiovascular system, to the vascular endothelial cells throughout the body. So that's a great thing to do, man. Just go for a walk after a meal. That's probably more than 2 minutes, but
yeah. As long as you train right afterward, you're more or less fine. Like,
yeah, well,
I think about it all the time. Like if you think about like what a workout drink is, oftentimes it's protein and sugar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you're intentionally putting sugar in your body during workouts or right before workouts or potentially right after workouts. Like,
and intra workout too. Like that's what I like for clients to do is especially if it's like a strength training session or you're broken up a little bit, drinking this is very different than the diabetes conversation, but like that's when you're taking in carbohydrate while you're using your muscles. So you're actually never allowing the chance for like glycogen. Well, even if you do get glycogen stores depleted, you're not getting a reduction in blood glucose, which is problematic for performance. But it's the same biology. Absolutely. But like, yeah, in the case of an excess carbohydrate consumption from a big meal, from a like birthday cake or whatever it is, yeah, you can mitigate that cardiovascular insult that is a massive glucose spike. sustained biology, when we're talking about, and we shift gears and look at the performance side of things, we're trying to optimize carbohydrate availability for both the workout itself and also starting the repair process post-workout, stimulate muscle protein synthesis and all that good stuff. And usually you take that right along with like some whey protein so that the carbohydrate, that glucose is sort of co-delivered, co-transported. It facilitates also the delivery of those amino acids for muscle growth and repair. Yeah, man, it's all the same. Like muscle contraction combined with nutrient availability is a great thing, both for performance and for optimization of some of these health parameters too. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Where can people find you, my man?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Dr. Nathan Jenkins. That's all one word, and that's pretty much where I hang out. I don't have a TikTok. I got a personal Facebook page, but yeah, that's the best place.
I think that's about to end, right? Isn't
Coach Travis Mash. Don't. Not yet.
Not yet. All right.
Not yet.
Mashelite.com.
New guy in charge.
Oh, yeah.
The new homie at the helm here.
Okay. Yeah, so Mashelite.com. Read my articles at Jim O'Weir. Or if you're local, Triad, North Carolina, come see me, Rise Indoor Sports.
There we go. Douglas E. Larson.
Right on. I'm on Instagram, Douglas E. Larson. Nathan, appreciate you coming on the show, brother.
Man, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're going to do this again soon. I'm Anders Warner at Anders Warner, and we are Barbell Shrugged at Barbell_Shrugged. And make sure you get over to rtlab.com. You know what that is? That's the place that you can find out more about our signature program, RTA, Inside Rapid Health Optimization. All of the lab testing, the performance analysis, everything health optimization and performance optimization inside Rapid Health Optimization. That's a lot of optimizations going on.
A lot of optimizations.
I know. But hang out. This is what happens, Travis, when we have new things to talk about on the show. I'm not as like rapping. It's freestyle. rtlab.com. Friends, we'll see you guys next week.